Welcome to AFrame Lesson 1.7. In this video, we're going to see how we can manipulate our basic AFrame components by using some additional attributes to change the way they look. We're going to focus primarily on the sphere and the cylinder, but I want to encourage you that all these components have additional attributes that will allow you to modify the way they look. So let's get to it. Oops, let's go run that. All right, so as our motivation, we have two spheres and a cylinder. I'm just going to give you a little side look. So the cylinder's been rotated, so it's lying flat. And let's go ahead and play around with the scale property for our first cylinder. Now, in an earlier video, we saw that we can scale something across all three axes, and that would allow us to grow and shrink our particular object. But it doesn't mean that you have to scale it equally on each axis. So I'm going to put a 1, 2, and a 1, representing that I want this thing to be scaled on the y-axis, but not on the x and z. Again, you might be tempted to think that, okay, so I don't want to change my x and z values. Let me put a 0 in there. The problem with putting a 0 is that 0 equates to nothing. So when you say to scale down to nothing, essentially your model is going to disappear because it's going to scale it down to such a small unit that you won't see this anymore. So if you want to still be able to see something and keep those axes or the amount of stretching or shrinking on that axis to its original size, you put a value of 1. Okay, so you can see here it's gotten larger across the y-axis. And if we take a little spin, you can see everything else has kind of stayed the same. So we could scale on 2 of the axes and keep one of them the original height. So from this angle, it still looks the same. When we take a side look to it, you'll notice that it's a disc. Again, and there might be many different scenarios where you need that type of shape. Now, the scale property can be applied to all different types of components, or all the components, I should say. So definitely, keep that in the back pocket if you need to somehow change the way something looks simply by stretching or shrinking it. All right, let's take a look at the sphere. Now for the sphere, I'm going to go over to AFrame IO just to show you, there's so many attributes you can play with just by clicking through it. So I'm going to go down to where the website keeps it, and let's go down to the sphere. So yeah, it gives you the basic sphere, but then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see all these additional attributes you can play with. And the one that I want to play with right now is this phi start and phi length. So let's go here. Let's say phi dash start equals, let's say 0. Keep it simple. And we notice that on the website, I'll go back to it for a second, it seemed like it went up to 360. So I don't want to do 360. Let's say I want to have a half circle. So I'm going to do a 180. And let's take a look at it from over here. Okay, so at initial glance, you might say, well, nothing looks different about the sphere. But let's take a side view to it. Okay, notice that half of the sphere is gone. Now I'm going to keep going around. And you'll also notice that it kind of seems to disappear. That's because we're seeing the inside of the sphere. Again, we also saw in an earlier video that AFrame will only texture one side of the component. If you want both sides of the component to be textured, essentially the inside and the outside, we have to add an additional attribute called side equals double. And let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go the same thing. I'm going to go from the side view. There's our half circle. Oops, why didn't it do it? Did I misspell something, or did I put it on the wrong? Oh, I put it on the wrong one. It should have been on the sphere, not the cylinder. And I think at this point, I'm just going to kick it out to a bigger page. Just make it nicer for us to look at. Okay, so you can see here now with the side equals double, I cut the sphere in half, which means I'm able to see the inside, but now the inside actually is textured, so it doesn't become transparent, being able to see through it. So you might say, well, what if I wanted this side closed off? Well, here's where you would combine this half sphere possibly with another thin cylinder to kind of create the base of this half circle. Again, just building off the concept from a previous lesson. All right, so let's go ahead and play around now with the cylinder. So let's go back to A-frame. Let's look at our cylinder. And when you look at the examples, you'll see it gives you a lot of different examples. And for this one, we see here that there's an additional attribute called segments radial that accepts a number. And in this example, they put a 6, which means it's giving us a hexagon. So let's go ahead and create that or copy that. And let's modify it a little bit for our purposes. And let's put a 3. I want you to think about it for a second. If 6 gave us a hexagon, what does 3 give us? Okay. So you can see here, it's given us a triangular prism. So prisms are a very useful object. Again, it's not organic to A-frame. A-frame doesn't have a prism component. But what they decided to do instead is that they took the cylinder, gave it this segments radial attribute, so you could transform a cylinder into a prism. And then similarly, we can also, let's change this to a 5. And you can see here now, it's a prism with a base that's a pentagon. Now the other thing, since we're here at the A-frame website, we see something that says Pac-Man. So let's just go ahead and copy that. And in this case, they're doing 2 different attributes here. We're doing theta start and theta length, which were also available for this sphere. So that's the one thing you'll also notice, that some attributes are common to many different components. Now, because this has to do really with degrees, you could put this in a box, but it wouldn't make any sense. It's not going to crash your website. It's not going to crash the component, but it just won't give you any effect. So realize some attributes make sense with some components, but not with others. All right, so let's see this Pac-Man, see what they gave us. Okay, so we can see here, it looks like it's Pac-Man on its side. And you're free to try to rotate it. Let's go ahead and do run rotation. See what we get. Let's rotate it on the, let's rotate it on the X. See if that gives us what we want. Okay, so it gives us Pac-Man facing down. Again, you're more than welcome to play around with rotation to get it on its side so we can actually see it from the side. But that's essentially it. So let's go back to our presentation. Let's review what we've done. So we explored a couple of additional attributes that we can apply to components. Again, we focused primarily on the sphere and the cylinder, which allowed us to explore the scale attribute for growing and shrinking or distorting our components. We also saw that the cylinder had a very unique attribute called segments radial that allowed us to produce a prism. For both of these components, we saw that they had a attribute of phi start and phi length, or theta start and theta length, which allowed us to cut portions of that sphere and cylinder. Again, there's so many attributes that are available to you. I highly encourage you, when you work with a particular component, go check out the additional attributes and envision how you can use them in your world. So hopefully you're excited about using new components that aren't part of the A-frame at the basic level, and enjoy.